So today, Leica announced a companion to one of my favorite cameras of all time, the Leica M11 with the new M EV1. About a month ago, I got to spend a few days with the camera, and I've definitely put together a lot of thoughts. So today we're going to talk about the M EV1, talk about where it fits in the Leica ecosystem, and why I actually do think it's a really good move for Leica. Now, for some context, when the Leica M11 was first announced, I didn't get a pre-production unit, I didn't get anything. I drove to the Leica store in Bellevue that morning and made a video based on my impressions, having driven to the store and done my own thing. This time was obviously a little bit different. Leica flew me and a bunch of friends of mine out to Italy to check out the camera in person. But they're obviously not paying me. They didn't tell me what to say, anything like that. And you're definitely going to hear my very brutally honest thoughts about this camera, where it is in the market, and whether or not you in particular should purchase it. Now, right off the bat, I think a lot of people, as soon as kind of rumors started popping up about the possibility of this camera existing, I had a lot of people really worried that they were going to be getting rid of the rangefinder. So the rangefinder, I have two of their new, now I guess 3 segments of M cameras here. Both of them include rangefinders and both of them include an M mount. Essentially, they made a big presentation about how important the rangefinder is, how innovative it was at the time. We got like a whole history of Leica cameras, which was really fun. But they also, I don't know if you noticed in September around there, they started launching some small campaigns about how important the rangefinder is and how big of a part of their ethos it is. So now currently I don't have the M EV1 with me because they are obviously in very high demand and short supply right now, but pretend we have an M EV1 here. We have the M11 and we have a film Leica. So we have now 3 different segments of M cameras. We have an M with an EVF. We have an M with a rangefinder that's also digital. And then we have an M with a rangefinder that is film. So that is their kind of their 3 segments of M cameras. The rangefinders are not going anywhere, to the applause and joy of many of us who feel like that is kind of the most pure, maybe not version of photography out there, but it's definitely the most pure form of Leica. I can't imagine them ever getting rid of the rangefinder, to be honest, and the amount of talk about how much just the employees love the rangefinder, the marketing people love the rangefinder, all that stuff. I don't see it going anywhere. So I guess that was a nice little kind of confirmation for me, at least, that the thing I love so much about the brand and the thing I think is so unique about the brand is here to stay. So let's talk about what is the same and what's different to the M11. Essentially, the M EV1 has the same internals as the M11P-ish. So it does have internal storage like the M11 at 64 gigabytes, but it also has the internals of the M11P as far as like it also has content credentials. It shares the same sensor and the same processor as the M11 series, but it does not actually share the same sensor and processor as the Q3. Now, as far as the feel and build goes, it's pretty much identical to the M11. It has mostly the same body. The only difference being that you are not going to have the ISO dial here because you have the EVF. So it has the same kind of specs as the Q3. So you have the 5.76 million dot display. It's a 1/2 inch, which a 0.76 magnification. You also have the diopter adjustments that you have in the Q3. Obviously, you don't have that with the optical viewfinder of the M11. And now it's mostly the same, but they did talk about how they had to shave a little bit off to fit it into this body. So it's not like they just took the exact same viewfinder and just shoved it into here. They did have to modify it to get it in here, but as far as specs go, it's pretty much the same performance that you're going to be getting. You will see a difference in the kind of leatherette. So on the M here, the M11, you have kind of like this just kind of traditional leather kind of pattern. And the only real visual difference, again, other than the obvious ones, is that leatherette on the M EV1 is going to be that kind of like diamond pattern of sorts. It's one of those things that just slightly sets it apart, and it slightly kind of pushes it into more of like a future-y looking thing. All that to say, I guess I will add, this video isn't sponsored by anybody, but I do have a few affiliate links down in the description below. So a few things that I find really, really useful useful for my camera in particular. First of which is this little thumb grip here from IDS Works. I just really like it. It is something that if you haven't used a Film M, I just rest my thumb on the Film Advanced lever, and this gives you kind of that same feel. And then finally, if you're picking up the M EV1 and you wanted to make it look a little bit more stealth, you can definitely pick up these red dot replacement things from Analogous. I'm just a big fan of how good and minimal this looks, and I think that the M EV1 would look even that much cooler, that much more minimal with one of these dots as well. So you can check out all those things in the description down below. Each of those will give me like a tiny little percentage, a few dollars here and there to support the channel. And also, if you aren't subscribed and you like my Leica content, please drop a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. It definitely helps out the channel quite a bit. Now, if you want to hear more about the internals of this camera, the M EV1, or obviously the M11, you can check out my M11 video. All of the things that I talk about the reasons I upgraded from the M10 to the M11 are also true of the M EV1. I'm a big fan of this camera. I love this sensor, and I have a similar sensor, not the same, but a similar sensor in two of my Sony cameras. I've used this in multiple other cameras as well, a similar 60 megapixel sensor. But I think that part of the reason why this sensor just does better, maybe it's because it doesn't have phase detect autofocus points on it. Maybe it has different layers. Maybe they have some other way to better maximize dynamic range, color fidelity, all those kind of things. But the M11 and now M EV1 is the best iteration of this 60 megapixel sensor. So as far as image quality goes, it is the best image quality that I've gotten out of camera outside of medium format. If you want the best, pretty much the best 35 millimeter photography sensor out there, it's in the M11, it's in the M EV1. Now, I'm probably going to try to get my hands on another copy of the M EV1 and do a direct comparison side by side. What I did, because I am so invested in this system, I've been shooting with the rangefinders for so long, is I was actually wearing my M11 and the M EV1 together, and I was swapping my own lenses and trying to just feel out the differences in using the rangefinder and then using the EVF. Now, I have a great affinity for the rangefinder. I think it's one of the most pure versions of photography out there. It's the most film-like experience that I can get. It's the most detached from the high-powered phase detect autofocus, tracking autofocus kind of setup that I can get. And it's a reason why I really, really love this camera. I will say, though, that I've realized not as many people love that experience, and that's fine. I think a lot of people really do love the aesthetics and the size and the sensor and all the things that the M11 series gives you, but they aren't necessarily as in love with the rangefinder. I can still focus rangefinder really well. It's one of my favorite focusing method, by far my favorite manually focusing method, but I know a lot of people out there that don't like this. In comes the M EV1 with a very, very familiar EVF setup. It's also a really great EVF. It's high resolution, the UI is really intuitive, and as you start to move the focus on your lens, you can then see it on the live view on the back. It automatically punches in to whatever magnification you want. You can do that, but you can also have it set to the frame advanced lever here. So there's a lot of times where when I was using the M EV1, I had this up to my face, and then I'd just be able to click it over with my thumb, and you can either click it forward or backwards. The first of which being to turn on or off focus peaking. The second would be to just automatically punch in to whatever, magnification you want, which is really great for kind of confirming focus on something like a still subject or a landscape or something like that. And then obviously you can just keep it as is and not use any of those functions and just use it as like a regular EVF. That being said, I found it pretty darn intuitive to have my kind of hand up here focusing. My thumb's already generally in this area anyway, but I found that my thumb's already kind of in this area. So just clicking it back and forth this way was a really, really easy way to either turn focus peaking on or off or magnify it when needed. And I think that I got to use the camera for 2 or 3 days. So it wasn't like a huge experience where I got to practice it a lot and do a lot of things. I definitely took hundreds of photos with it, but it's one of those things that I think is going to take someone maybe a couple weeks to really feel like it's intuitive, feel like they're nailing focus really, really well. I think that for a lot of people, it's already going to be way more intuitive than a rangefinder. But if you're someone that's already invested in the M ecosystem and you're used to the rangefinder, I still found myself much more accurate and much quicker with the rangefinder. But again, I think a lot of other people are going to be able to use that and be totally fine with that experience. Now, there's a bunch of other reasons why I think the M EV1 makes a lot of sense, specifically being the fact that the current M11 system, the rangefinders, they do a really, really great job of using the 28, the 50, and the 35 millimeter focal lengths. That's kind of like, that's what you get when you move the frame selector. You also have all the secondary ones. You have 75, you have 90, and you have 135 as options. The amount of people I talk to that have just had a hard time focusing at 90 millimeter on an M. I am like very, very accurate 28, 35, 50 on an M, even wide open. I've been doing it for a decade now. That being said, I definitely have had issues shooting with 135 and 90 millimeter lenses, getting focus, getting framing, all that stuff. I think that's where the M EV1 makes a ton of sense. Like, you get the exact framing, you get exactly what you're seeing. It just makes focusing a lot easier, especially at those longer focal lengths. And then same thing with like the wider focal lengths. So I've had a 21 millimeter in my bag for a long, long time now. And I've never actually owned like a secondary viewfinder. I've always just memorized like what a 21 millimeter is. So I pull the camera up to my face. Obviously, I'm not getting the framing. I'm just guessing. I have a general idea of what a 21 millimeter frame is going to look like. That's where, especially if you're doing something even wider, or like, let's say you really love the 24 millimeter, it's allowing you to really see those lenses for what they are. I will say that the other thing is that a lot of these lenses, as good as they are, some of them have some weird flaring. Like my 28 millimeter Summicron, it's got this really, really weird flaring pattern that when you're using the rangefinder, you don't end up seeing. Like, so there's been plenty of times where I've needed to Photoshop it out of images, or there's been times where I couldn't even Photoshop it out of images and I had to just deal with this weird little like orb thing in the bottom of my photos. But one of the things I specifically did was I shot into the sun with the M EV1 and it could see exactly where that little orb was, and I could find a way to minimize that or put it in a spot where I could Photoshop it out or whatever. Again, it's not something that's going to take you that often. You're not going to see it that often, but it is something that you can see in the viewfinder. And another thing is with some of these vintage lenses, sometimes the character can kind of get a little bit out of hand, and it's one of those things you don't notice until afterwards. But even when I was shooting with Dave Herring's 35 1.4, the steel rim, that thing has like a lot of character to say the least. And it's kind of like that, like a glow to it in some ways. And there are times where I like that and times where I don't. So unless I'm back here chimping, I'm not really going to see kind of how much of that's happening. With the M EV1, you can see that really, really obviously. And so I think it kind of opens up a little bit more of how you're interacting with the lenses that you have. Now, before we get into the whole price of the matter, and that is going to be a big rant, but the other main thing that I didn't really like about the camera necessarily was its kind of like response time. So one of the things I talked to them about was the fact that, again, like kind of reiterating the fact that the M EV1 has the M11 internals in it, which means it has a slower processor than the Q3 does. Obviously, there's going to be less reliance on a processor on the M11 versus the Q3 that has to deal with autofocus and all sorts of other things, where the M11 doesn't necessarily have to have, video and things like that. Now, because of that, you're also getting more of kind of the lag that you would get when you're using like the VisiFlex. So at times I would have the camera off, I would see something, I would turn the camera on, pull the camera up to my face, and it'd be like 3 seconds before I was able to actually take a photo. And let's just see this where we're at right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, about the same. Took a long time to turn this on as well. But I think that the hardest part about that is not necessarily the fact that it takes a long time to turn it on, but as I'm pulling this camera up to my face, the viewfinder here is already working because it's optical. So as the camera is turning on, I'm focusing, and then usually about the right time, I'm able to take the photo. The problem is with the M EV1, you pull the camera up to your face, you wait 4 seconds, then you have to take, set up your scene, you have to focus, you have to compose, all that stuff. So it's not that the camera is any slower than the M10 or the M11 actually already is. It's the fact that you can't actually see through the viewfinder or do any of that kind of like pre-shooting routine thing that you can do on here because you already have an optical viewfinder. So camera's off right now. I'm pulling this up, I'm focusing, it's on, and boom, I can take a photo. It takes like double the amount of time to do that with the M EV1, and the fact that you're using a viewfinder here instead of an optical viewfinder, it's also using the battery more, not a ton necessarily, but I would definitely need to be carrying more than one battery. To be fair, like when I was going out just casually kind of taking photos and stuff, I never ended up needing to have a second battery. I did borrow one just in case. I never ended up needing it, but if I was doing like a wedding or something like that with the M EV1, I would absolutely have to have 2 batteries because it just drains the battery a lot faster, obviously, than the M11 with an optical viewfinder. So it's one of the things, and I did talk to them about it. Like I was like, hey, so like if you could have like put the other processor in there and stuff. And generally the answer I got was that it cost a lot more because they would have had to put way more time and energy in engineering the relationship between the faster processor and the current sensor. And then it would also just delay the release by a long time because it's not like that can just be done overnight. So for the fact that it was both a cheaper camera to make using existing technology and they were able to release it much faster, it just made a ton of sense to me. Of course, I think that would have been preferable in like performance to not have the lag there in a camera like that. But it's one of those things that's like, all right, well, just don't turn your camera on and off all the time, buy a separate battery, and you're not going to be dealing with that as much. So kind of an easy fix in a way. But it's one of those things that like, yeah, it makes sense why they didn't switch up the processor and kind of like Frankenstein's more parts together. But it was one of the things that a few times, probably a couple times a day, was like just a slight annoyance. And one of the things that was a different experience than it was with my M11. Now, I'm sure you're saying, Benj, we're how long into this video? Why don't you just tell people to buy an M11 and buy a VisiFlex? They're not that expensive. And yeah, I'm going to tell you right now that the thing that I am the most critical about this camera is going to be the price. So there's going to be a few things kind of at play here. Obviously, we're dealing with tariffs. The fact that we have to pay significantly more for things that shouldn't be this much. We have a tariff coming out of most of Europe now, and so we're going to be spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars more than we would have had we not had these tariffs. So the price currently is at just under $9,000, which again, it's not like Leica is pocketing all that money, but it is one of those things that is going to be very detrimental to the amount of people doing this. I think that the M EV1 is kind of for people that want a lot of that experience. They might be kind of moving from like a Q series and they don't want to fully jump into the rangefinder. Some people are just going to walk into a Leica store. They're not really going to care what the thing costs. They're going to find the camera that's best for them and they're going to just purchase it. There's other people like me that I have never bought a single thing of Leica brand new. I've bought them all used. And now you can buy an M11 series for like 6,000 to 7,000 on the used market pretty easily. Then you can purchase even a brand new VisiFlex for $1,000, and you're going to be still at minimum $1,000 underneath what the M EV1 is going to be. Again, that's not necessarily all of Leica's fault in this, but I do think that if they had been able to put the purchase price down to like sub $8,000, maybe some sort of bridge in the gap between, like Q series and the M series, like the M11, the rangefinders, I think that would make a lot more sense for a lot of people. I understand why they're pricing it why they are. I get the rationale. I just think that if there was any way that they could have lowered the price to something that, again, that would bridge the gap between the Q series and the M rangefinder series, it would have made a lot more sense, because I really do see this as like a gateway to the rangefinder and kind of a stepping stone in between. If you took the M11 and you took the Q3 and you combined a lot of the things in them, it just is what this camera is. And so there's a lot of people out there that they really are going to have to like a focal length a lot more than 28 and 43 to sort of justify having this, because you can still do most of the same things that this camera does with a built-in lens for cheaper on the Q series. And so putting the M EV1 at like $9,000-ish, and then you're going to have to buy a lens on top of that, it just makes it prohibitively more expensive than I think that this product category should be. I guess we will see how the market responds to this in general, but I guess I was wrong about the RX1R in some ways too. I own that camera now, and apparently sales for that are amazing, and I also think that camera's too expensive, but people still bought it. Now, do I think this is going to be a great camera and a lot of people are going to love it? Absolutely. There's going to be a ton of people that are going to say, I've been waiting for this for a long time. I've loved the M lenses that I have, or I have always wanted M lenses or something, and the rangefinder just hasn't ever sat well with me. There are going to be massive segment of people that feel that way, and I think that's why this camera is going to be a great success. It will be a camera that a lot of people will really like, will really appreciate. It's more adaptive. It's going to allow more people into the M system because of the flexibility that you get with that. And the fact that, like, if you're going to be a primarily EVF user, the experience is going to be much better on the M EV1 than it's going to be with the M11 plus a VisiFlex. So overall, again, I think this is a really cool camera, really a good way for Leica to expand the M system, expand their lineup, expand the amount of people that are able to use their cameras. I'm very happy, again, to reiterate that they are not doing away with the rangefinder cameras at all. It could not have been more clear to me that the rangefinder is like at the heart of the Leica ethos and things like that. So I don't see this as replacing literally anything. It's just like branching off into its own new market segment that hopefully will be able to bring more people into the brand. Hopefully we'll be able to, even bring in more revenue and things like that, and allow them to do more things with the camera brand. And it's one of those things that, like, I think that Leica as a brand is such a pure photography experience, and the more things that can get put out into the world that allow that experience and stuff with the rangefinder to go forward, the better. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out my video on the M11 up here. Check out more of my videos on the M series up here, and I will see you in one of those.